Hello, everyone. Welcome to our Spiritual Spotlight series. Today, I am joined by Matt Zemon. He is a psychedelic medicine expert. He is a dedicated explorer of the inner world and a passionate advocate for the thoughtful and responsible use of psychedelics. He is also the author of the Amazon bestseller, Psychedelics for Everyone, a beginner's guide to these powerful medicines for anxiety, depression, addiction, PTSD, and expanding consciousness. Matt, thank you so much for coming on the Spiritual Spotlight series. I'm really happy to have you here today.
Rachel, I'm excited to be here. Thanks for doing this.
So I'm just going to jump right in
Do it.
and do it. And what inspired you to explore the inner world through psychedelics, and how has this journey shaped your understanding of mental health and spirituality?
It's a big question to start off with. All right. I fell into this by accident, actually. I had some friends invite me to a guided magic mushroom or psilocybin experience, and I wasn't a drug user.
Right.
I really didn't know what to expect. I didn't do a ton of research, um, but I did decide to do it. And in that first journey, I reconnected with my mom, who died when I was 22 and she was 49, and I felt this sense of safety and love and realized I didn't feel like that in my normal life, and just had kind of insight after insight. And I left that going, wow, what was that? And ended up going back to school to get a master's in psychology and neuroscience, and traveled around and experienced different psychedelics from different providers, and just trying to learn more about consciousness and who I am and what are we doing here. It's been a journey.
I have to say, in reading your book, and it's right in the beginning. I love that you share like your person. You have five personal experiences that you
Mhm.
share. The one with your mom, like being somebody who's spiritual, who connects with spirit, like you could just feel that emotion and that wonderful journey and moment that you have with your mom to realize she's always with you. And I love the fact that you kind of bridge the gap for death is just a doorway and we're never alone. And I just thought that was so profound. And you could just, I know you had experience with your daughter, your son, with clearing some trauma, with your mom. Like it was so like, I love that you share those journeys, because sometimes when you read, this has a lot of scientific information and whatnot. Sometimes it's hard to make a parallel between, okay, well, spirituality and then I'm going to go do ketamine. Like, you know what I mean? It's kind of a hard jump. So I want to say thank you so much for including those vulnerable moments in your book. It was really profound.
Really appreciate you saying that. When I really had given up on God. I'd given up on spirituality when yeah, I mean, I lost in that little window of time. I lost my great aunt, my grandmother, my father, and my mom, all within like 4 or 5 years. So it was just a lot of people, and yeah, I just couldn't see a way that any higher power, sacred, could
Yeah.
do such a thing. And then to find spirituality again in my late 40s was just it's just surprising. I was the kind of guy who was reading like God is Not Great by Christopher Hitchens. This is like it was just not expected.
Yeah.
And now it's really where I spend most of my time, are in these ceremonial psychedelic
Yeah.
experiences.
I think that it's so profound. So, in your book, Psychedelics for Everyone, you discuss psychedelics as a tool for transformation.
Mhm.
Can you maybe elaborate on how these substances facilitate such profound changes?
So I want to also be careful with the word. I understand why we all use the word transformation, but at this point, what I believe is that the first thing psychedelics do is they help us remember who we are.
I
So it
love
doesn't
that.
change who we are. It just reminds us that we are loved and powerful and enough and worthy, and that anything other than that is a story we've been telling ourselves.
Mm,
Um, Now, with that remembrance and the neuroplasticity that psychedelics induce, we do have an option or an opportunity to make behavioral change. It's part of why we talk about integration is really where the work is with psychedelics. Psychedelics aren't a cure; they are a catalyst to help us see, and then it's up to us to then take advantage of whatever it is that we um, to actualize whatever it is that we want to actualize from it. So that part in my other book, and Beyond the Trip, which is a psychedelic preparation and integration journey, There are 4 weeks of homework for people following a
Wow.
psychedelic experience. There's a 30-day gratitude journal to help just reprogram the mind for the positive versus so many negative things that we are taught at an early age to kind of have that as our focal point. So
One of the things in your answer that you brought up is that it's almost, we are facilitating the healing in which we desire within. So
mhm.
we can use psychedelics as a tool to maybe illuminate some of these things that we're trying to, maybe we want to reconnect with our mom, maybe we want to release trauma, maybe we want to ease our anxiety. And I like that it's a tool, but ultimately I have to consciously physically decide whether or not I want to take on that healing.
Yeah, that's true for so much of this. So we talk about in the as we organize these types of experiences, what is our role? So I see my role as creating a safe container. So we hire excellent facilitators who are really experienced in this. We make sure they're bringing pure medicine, so that's a concern. We make sure that people's health have a health intake that's reviewed by a medical professional to make sure there's no contraindications. We make sure that people understand the risks that are associated with this and come in with an informed consent process.
Yeah.
Make sure that there's good musicians to help guide through the experience and create a soundscape. Make sure there are chefs to keep people nourished. From that point, the experience that each person has is their experience. If they feel they had a breakthrough, they had a breakthrough. It's on them. They feel they didn't have a breakthrough, that's also on them. So no credit, no blame for the actual experience, or to use your other word, transformation or remembrance.
Right.
We just can create a safe space.
I really liked, and this kind of is deterring for my questions, that you brought up like how, as somebody who is facilitating these kind of healing sessions, safety is paramount. Like in whoever you're booking with, maybe I book with you in your company or someone else. Like I love the fact that you touch on safety is so, so important when you're going through this kind of experience, because you're in an altered state of consciousness, and who knows what kind of, if something, like you did mention how people have, sometimes you go into a power struggle and there could be, unfortunately some abuse that takes place. And I really like that you touch upon that almost as a, okay, well, if you're going to do this, make sure you know that you need to be safe and who you're going to be partnering this journey with.
That's really important, Rachel. So my book's called Psychedelics for Everyone, but under no circumstances do I mean that everyone should take a psychedelic. I want
I
people to
think you
read
even
this
say that in
book.
the book.
I do.
I
I
think you say
do.
that multiple times.
Absolutely. I want people to read this to understand, well, maybe it's for me. Maybe it's for someone I love. Maybe it's just because I want to understand so it changes the way I vote in the next election. All of that's important. The I even hesitate these days to even use the word safe. We talk about risk reduced. All medicine has risk. Almost 200
Absolutely.
people every year die from acetaminophen
Yep.
overdoses. So there is a risk for those who are interested in. There's a really cool study by Imperial College London, Dr. David Nutt, where he said, let's forget how drugs are classified and let's just look at harm to self and harm to others. And he looked at a bunch of drugs. Far left hand side, I think it's 72 on his chart. Most harm to self, most harm to others is alcohol. You work your
Absolutely.
way down, you have tobacco, you have heroin, but all the way on the far right hand side of his chart are mushrooms. It's like a 6, LSD is a 7, MDMA is a 9. So are there risks? Absolutely.
Mhm.
Relatively, not as much, but people should know the risks going in from again medical. Then we get into the risks of contraindications. Maybe you're taking some other medicine or supplement that leads to a dangerous contraindication. So you have to watch
Right.
out for that. We then get into family background. So maybe you have, I'll use an example, maybe a parent is schizophrenic and maybe you're young. Well, this might not be the right thing for you to do at this time of
Right.
life. And then what you touched on, Rachel, you get into the vulnerability of being in a non-ordinary state of consciousness and being truly in another space. And you really need to trust your facilitators and your fellow travelers in that experience to keep you safe. Johns
Absolutely.
Hopkins has done beautiful research that if people pay attention to source Where do your drugs come from? Set your mindset going in and setting the physical environment. The probability of a bad experience, a truly bad experience, is very low. But those are the things that people really need to care about as they're deciding. I want to do this in a medical environment. I want to do this in a ceremonial environment. I want to do this as psychedelic tourism involvement or environment. All of that's
Yeah.
important.
So, so important. And you do bring up, like, I'm a registered nurse. In my day life, I actually run a
Hmm.
doctor's office. So you're right. People do overdose from Tylenol, Advil. Like, people think that over the counter drugs are safe, and they're really not. And you have to be so conscious and aware of what you're consuming in your body. And I like that you bring up the chart of alcohol's way up here, but these psychedelics really are down here. And if you're going to a licensed, a practitioner who is studied and trained, well versed, you're going to have such an amazing outcome, I feel.
Absolutely. And I think what you're speaking to overall is agency. So we,
Yes.
again, early on, we're taught to give up our agency to our parents and then to our teachers and to
Or to
our
our
doctors,
doctors.
and on and on. The psychedelic process is about remembering who you are, you taking control over this, you taking first understanding who are we at our core,
Hmm,
then understanding what do we want to experience in this life, and then understanding it's our movie. We can make this happen. So
right.
part of this journey for everyone is deciding up front, I want to do this, if that is what they decide, and I'm going to keep myself safe. I'm going to keep
Yes.
myself safe by asking these questions. Where did your medicine come from? Did you have it tested? What is your experience as a facilitator? What are the risks associated? What are you going to give me in terms of music or eye masks or mattresses? What are you going to do for me in advance for intention setting? What are you going to do for me afterwards for integration? And maybe they're not going to do pieces of that and you have to do it yourself. And that's fine as long as
Mhm.
you have the information.
Right. That's so, so important. Like, I've completed some interviews with, a couple different people that, they lead psychedelic retreats and whatnot. And you and now another group, like, really this integration period after the experience. Like, I like that you're touching upon that, because I think sometimes people may go for an ayahuasca retreat and they come home and it's like, okay, well, now what? So I like that you have information in an integration period post this trip. It's so important.
It is. And again, Johns Hopkins has great research that if you're trying to optimize this experience, you're trying to make the results of the positive behavioral and mental changes last longest.
Yeah.
An integration process is important. That can be with a therapist, it can be with a coach, it can be with a spiritual group, it can be on your own,
Yeah.
but just doing the work.
Absolutely. What do you think are some misconceptions about psychedelics that you've encountered, and how do you address them?
Um, so we've all just lived through a 50-year prohibition, and no one told us it was a prohibition. So what did that look like? It looked like, as we grew up, seeing commercials on TV, just say no, and frying pan and eggs, and this is your brain, this is your brain on
Signed
drugs.
our dare contract.
Yes, absolutely. Yes, we did that in the in Philadelphia as well. That's funny. And then what else did it look like? It looked like article after article about how these drugs have no medicinal use.
Right.
Article after article about how these drugs are addicting. Um, yeah, and then it looked like a disproportionate amount of people, black and brown people, being jailed for drug offenses, even if they were consuming drugs at the same percentages as white people.
Right.
So it took its toll and we were given bad information for many, many years. So how does that then materialize today? Well, people have visceral reactions when it comes to the idea of using these substances for any purpose.
Absolutely.
And they're scared. And I get it. I totally get it. And they ask questions, what is this gonna put a hole in my brain? Is it going to do this, that, or the other thing? Am I going to get addicted? What do you mean you're going to use a psychedelic for alcohol use or smoking
For
or
addiction.
heroin addiction?
Right.
Yeah, any of these substance use challenges. So there's a learning curve, and that's okay.
Yeah.
We're seeing this beautiful rise right now. There are over 300 academic institutions studying psychedelics.
That's
We're
amazing.
seeing that, yeah, the studies are being done on everything from depression to anxiety to PTSD, eating disorders, OCD, substance use, autism. I mean, incredible
Chronic
range.
pain. Yeah.
Chronic pain. Yeah, absolutely. Um, so more information is coming out. We have a medical model where right now ketamine is legal in all 50 states and people are using that. MDMA should be re-legalized this year, which is amazing. And then psilocybin, FDA has given breakthrough therapy designation to that. They're doing beautiful work with end of life patients, as just one example of psilocybin.
Right.
Um, we have somewhere between 200 and 2,000 psychedelic churches in America. So people are experiencing them that way. And then we're seeing psychedelic retreat centers in Mexico, Jamaica, Peru, Costa Rica, Brazil, the Netherlands, multiple areas also appearing as options for people. And then in countries like Canada and
Yes.
Australia doing
Yeah.
amazing work. And then the entire state of Oregon, the entire state of Colorado with a medical framework and decriminalizing these medicines. So what an incredible time to be alive. And what an amazing shift that we all get to experience here when it comes to options for exploring consciousness or mental health options.
Absolutely. I actually have a friend whose daughter right now goes weekly for ketamine infusions
Mhm.
because she has a pain condition that years and years that has made her, suicidal and whatnot. And this is the first time she's having some relief by
It's
having
amazing.
it's like transformational. And thank goodness that that's an option, like you're saying. I think it's amazing. So let me ask you this. How do you think psychedelic experiences can help individuals reconnect with their true selves and reclaim a sense of purpose and meaning?
I like that. So there are different medicines for different purposes. Um, so I'll take you through maybe an arc of one set of ceremonies that I participate with does this arc. The first medicine that people are given is sassafras. Now, other ceremonies we use MDMA. It's a similar molecule. These are called MDMA and sassafras or MDA. These are all called empathogens or heart openers. So when people take a heart opener, they feel love for themselves. They feel love for others. Um, they quiets down the default mode network, so you don't have that inner narrator telling you you're not enough, you need to do more, you're not worthy. It turns off shame, blame, and guilt so that you can look back at your experiences and give an honest assessment. Okay, this was my role in the experience, and no bad me, it just is. Um, and then it gives us kind of a beacon of light of, okay, I'm now thinking this different way. I'm thinking about myself and others with lots of love. How can I do that in my everyday life? So let's call that like step one in the medicine journey. Step two in the ceremonial process is psilocybin or magic mushrooms. And with this one, this is like the interconnectedness of all things medicine. You feel that you are not separate from nature, but that you are a part of nature. You feel grounded into the earth. You feel connected, that we're all brothers and sisters in a very real sense, in a way that maybe it just didn't ring as true through the stories. And I think this medicine really helps. I call it like molecular cleaning. It takes us down to our core essence. It reminds us, it shows us, oh wow, inside, I'm amazing. And maybe I don't need to tell myself this story or that story, or look at my relationship with my wife or my partner or my friends or my colleagues or my family this way. I can look at it a whole different way. Or maybe I don't need to engage with this substance this way. I can look at it that way.
Yeah.
With both these medicines, we're going to have neurons firing together that haven't fired together in years. And that's, again, a remembrance of, oh, wow, I didn't always think the way I've been thinking. And that's powerful. And then it also puts us into the state of neuroplasticity where we can do all sorts of amazing things. And then I'll give one more medicine, one called bufo or 5-MeO-DMT. So this is the God molecule. It's the toad. You might have heard of lots of different names. This is our non-duality medicine. So in every other psychedelic that we know of, there's a subject and an object. With bufo, or 5-MeO DMT, there's not. There's just the universe. There's no time, there's no place, there's no you. And that's why many people say this is your personal conversation with your sacred. An incredible opportunity to feel deeply that we are having this human experience, but that we are spiritual creatures on a much longer journey. You put three of those things together, and yeah, people can really it can really change the way people look at the world.
So if somebody's having that arc where they take these, have these three different experiences,
Mhm.
how long would something like that take? Would that be over a weekend? Is that a day? Is that a week?
Typically, for something like that, you do 2 or 3 days. You would do maybe a whole day of sassafras, maybe a day of psilocybin, and then the bufo, since that's a shorter experience, could either be on the same day as the psilocybin or the next day. But it's similar, like in many cultures, they use I'll use ayahuasca, different medicine, very common in Central America, South America. Hawaii has an ayahuasca culture. Um, I typically would go down and do maybe 3 sessions with ayahuasca over 5 days. And that's pretty common protocol for that particular medicine. But yeah, over a few days. And what also happens, Rachel, when you do multiple day, multiple medicine, is it takes the pressure off. So many people like, oh, I spent all this money. If I've flown to Portland to do a psilocybin journey, it dropped, what, $3,500. I better get this experience the way I want this experience.
Yes.
It's a lot of pressure. Multiple days for whatever reason, people are like, okay, well, I have time. It's not the end of the world if this doesn't work. And because they're relaxed, they tend to have a great first day. After that first day, they're used to it. They've released their heart. They've practiced. They've gotten used to the facilitators and the musicians and their fellow travelers. So then when it comes time for psilocybin, they can dive deeper. And that's amazing.
I like the idea that it's also not just, like if you do spend the money and you have this expectation of I better
Mhm.
have the best experience ever. That just sounds so stressful. If it's
Mhm.
over a couple days, you like you said, you take that pressure off and that release off, and you probably have a more pleasurable experience. So I didn't even think about that. Like, oh my goodness. No,
Well,
like,
it's all that is also why I like group psychedelic experiences versus individual. I know in the medical model, they're so used to individual work.
yes.
But what happens in my experience with individual work is you maybe have 2 facilitators and 1 participant. Well, if that participant moves their pinky, the 2 facilitators have seen it. That's a lot of attention on the self. In
Yes.
a group ceremony, the energy moves around the room. And maybe, Rachel, you're releasing and I'm not. Or maybe this person's laughing and this person's crying. And the energy just moves and in a different way that's beautiful. And again, I think it helps forge connection. It helps remind us that we're not alone. It helps um, remind us that we all have our stuff and our experiences and our traumas that are really important to us. After the experience, in what's called a sharing circle, which is super common again in the ceremonial space,
Mhm.
maybe I don't want to talk, but I'm listening. And Rachel, you start talking about something you saw in your experience. And all of a sudden, it reminds me of something else that I hadn't really connected with in my experience. And all of a sudden, your learning, healing, and growing becomes my learning, healing, and growing. And then maybe I do say something and that connects with you or this person or that person. But I do feel that it makes the entire experience deeper um, and more resonant with people.
Absolutely. And this is why I myself like doing group healings and group led meditations and then sharing at the end, because when you share at the end, usually if somebody has a question or something, someone else is also thinking it.
Mhm.
So it helps that shared experience and that shared healing. And I like that it's also when you're having these sharing circles, it's also very vulnerable. But like you said, it's a safe container to be able to express what you're truly feeling and what you're experiencing. And that just sounds so beautiful for that moment.
I couldn't agree with you more. And as long as people go in knowing you don't have to share anything, you can, and no one's going to judge you. And if you do choose to share, you can share anything, and no
Yes,
one's going to judge you, and that's both is okay. And then people make the decision that's right for them.
I love that. So, with the growing acceptance of psychedelics, how do you envision the future of psychedelic therapy and its integration into mainstream healthcare?
So there are three ways that people access psychedelics in America. And I think all three are important to understand, and all three need to happen. The first way is, as you just referenced, the medical model. So these are people like us who want to be diagnosed. I have a thing, depression or anxiety or OCD, whatever. I have a diagnosis, and I want to meet somebody in a medical model, and I want to get therapy that is done in conjunction with these psychedelics. Great. That is beautiful. That is important. We need to train as many people as possible. There are others who say, I don't want that. I want a ceremony. I want to connect to my sacred. I want to explore myself. I want to optimize. I want to understand, why am I on this earth? And I want to meet somebody in a ceremonial model. Great. And I believe that these ceremonial leaders need to have a way to come out from being hidden
Yes.
and be able to share their knowledge, and for there to be trusted sources for these people. The third way is the decriminalization movement, which we have decrim nature chapters all over the country. So their premise goes like this: no adult should tell another adult that they shouldn't put nature in their body, or they can't put nature in their body. Beautiful premise. That is important for people who want to use drugs recreationally, but it's also important for those who can't afford to use them medically.
Right.
So all three things need to happen together. And I see a future where all of us are exploring our minds, our consciousness, our mental health, using the tools and the people that we're most comfortable using, but we're using this medicine to get to this next level.
Absolutely. That's
Do
so,
you have
so
time for one
important.
more comment on this?
Oh, absolutely. Go ahead.
All right, I'll say one more thing. So
I love
in
it.
the old days, there was just healer. And the healer was both a spiritual healer and a medical healer. In our Western society, we've separated those roles. And I
Yes, we
get that you
have.
could say psychedelics, if we gave it to the spiritual people, that they don't have the latest information about my brain and my body to keep me safe. Perfect, I get it. And conversely, if you give it just to the medical professionals, there are many of them who don't have any spiritual background, and they don't understand how this connects. So there is a collaboration, a reconciliation, an opportunity for both sides to work together in harmony, so that people can, again, go into either entry place that you would like to go and start with, but have both a spiritual experience and a biochemical. So we call that a biochemical, psychosocial, spiritual process, versus just, I'm going to give you some drugs, I'm going to put it in an IV in your arm, I'm going to take your vitals, and after it's over, I'm going to send you on your way.
Right.
It's legal to do that, but it's a
Hmm.
different process.
Absolutely. I have so many thoughts running in my brain right now. Just trying to integrate my RN self with my spiritual self. It's always fun. So let me ask you this. How do you approach the spiritual aspects of psychedelic experiences, and how do these experiences intersect with various religions and cultural beliefs?
This summer, there was a psychedelic science conference in Denver, and almost 13,000 people showed up with, I think the least expensive ticket was like $1,000. It was a big conference. And at that conference, you could take all sorts of tracks. So there was a therapist track and an academic track and a religious track. And in that religious track, there were sessions like psychedelics in Islam, psychedelics in Judaism, psychedelics in Christianity, psychedelics in Buddhism, Hinduism, you name it. Those tracks were there. Um, each of us have our own cultural background. We have our own beliefs, and I believe that psychedelics, when done right, for lack of a better word, doesn't judge or say you need to believe anything.
Right.
It's a tool to allow you to explore your history, your culture, your beliefs, and decide where you want to go with them. My experience, regardless of where you came from, psychedelics increases the amount of spirituality people feel. It's something like, there was a study looking at atheists in psychedelics, and I think like 70 or 75% no longer were atheists following their psychedelic experience. It's a big, big number.
Huge number.
Uh, Huge number. Um, Powerful, powerful medicine for people who want to explore. And actually, we are seeing the power of this with the studies being done right now with psilocybin and end of life. So here are people who've got terminal illnesses.
Mm.
They're being prescribed and doing this in a study setting, psilocybin, and they are and after that experience, their depression is down, their anxiety is down. Doesn't change the outcome, doesn't change that they're going to die in a relatively short period of time. What it changes is the quality of life for those people during that experience. So it's beautiful.
Absolutely.
I'll take it one more step. What is super exciting then to think about is, imagine now a world where we have some people who are taking this because they do have this existential crisis that is upon them, but now their family and friends are also able, maybe in a spiritual or a sacred process, to also take psychedelics and process in advance. Wow, this person means so much to me. I love this person so much, and I don't need to be quite as distraught as we're going into this experience. It changes changes the experience for those in the active state of transitioning, as well as those that love them. And that's incredible to think about.
Absolutely. I have a lot of experiences being a hospice nurse when I worked in the hospital,
Mm-hmm.
and also I worked in home care, where hospice we partnered with. So death with dignity, death with
Yes.
compassion. I mean, and not just sedating them until they pass. Like this just sounds like such an amazing, beautiful, healing experience to almost take away the fear of death as well. Like wow, that's amazing. It makes me want to go back to hospice and be like, are you doing this?
It is, yeah, I love the work being done in the hospice community. There's another sub hospice adjacent community of death doulas, and
Yes,
they do beautiful
they're
work in this
amazing.
space.
Yes.
Here in I'm in Chapel Hill, North Carolina, and down the road there's a town called Pittsboro. And in Pittsboro, there's a death fair every year where thousands of people come and they talk about death and they
That's
honor their
amazing.
ancestors and share their process. It's beautiful. Um, yeah,
We
it's
could take
amazing.
away the stigma of death and dying, especially in the United
Hmm.
States, and being okay to grieve and really talking openly about the process and that end stage of life. I think us as a society would have so much more compassion for one another. It's such a scary topic to talk about death when really it's not.
No, and we're not very mature. We don't it's going to happen to everybody, and we don't talk about it. We spend so much time thinking about our careers and learning everything there is to learn about whatever, computers, black holes, engineering, whatever, pick
Anything.
your thing.
Stock
And we
trade
don't
market.
spend right enough time, really in many cases, any time on what are we doing here? Who
Yeah.
are we? Where are we going? So we're very much worried about what's going to happen. We don't think enough about what's happening in the next life, and we certainly don't think about what's happening in this life.
So true. It's I think it's very, very hard for a lot of individuals to be present and to truly like take stock of where they are. And yeah, it's very interesting. But I also feel like, and I'm not sure for you too, especially with 2024 and the energy that's kind of coming onto the planet. And I'm sorry, I'm going off topic here, but it does feel like there's a lot of awakening and energetic momentum for people to turn more towards psychedelics and spirituality and alter states of consciousness to connect to divine within. Like I feel so many people are like, oh, well, I'm going through this now. Like it's a very interesting energetic experience right now.
I love that, Rachel. I mean, there's never been a better time to be alive. So we can start with that, regardless of what we see in the media. This is
So true.
amazing. Amazing. We have crime is down, violence against women is down, famine is down, disease is down,
Yeah.
income is up, poverty is down. So many things are great that are happening. And there are things that are challenges. But
Yeah.
because we have this period of prosperity relatively, and we have an opportunity to do amazing things with our lives, and now I don't think it's an accident. There's 309 academic institutions studying this, and that we have
Not at
bipartisan
all.
support for these medicines, and people want it. They're leaving churches in droves across the country right now, and psychedelics offer an opportunity to have a direct spiritual experience. And I think people are hungry for it.
they're hungry for it, and there's this almost, yeah, like, all right. So last question here.
Yes, yes, yes.
Finally, what do you hope readers will take away from your book? And what message do you want to impart on those exploring the world of psychedelics for personal growth?
So I'm going to go backwards. I want people to think about risk. So there's risk with this. Are you sure you want to do this for whatever reason? And then if the answer is yes, just take every possible step you can to reduce the risk. So pay attention to your source, your set, and your setting, and make sure you're safe. My book, again, it's called Psychedelics for Everyone. Whether this is for you, for someone you love, or just you just want the information to better understand what's happening, that's what I really want people to take away from the book. But that there are options, whether it's a medical option, a spiritual option, or a psychedelic tourism option. Those options are out there. If you're still listening to this podcast 40 minutes in, something's calling to you. Yeah, and go find your local psychedelic society, or ask around, or schedule a call with me or something. And yeah, and just again take responsibility to reduce your own risk
I
in this
love that.
process.
Well, Matt, thank you so, so much for coming on the Spiritual Spotlight series. This has been amazing. And thank you again.
Rachel, we could have talked another hour. Thank you for coming with such great questions and bringing the former hospice and nursing energy to this. I really appreciated that. Thank you.
Thank you.